Hi, my name is Benedict. It's mix walkthrough time again. I know I just did another one a couple of days ago with Marina and the Cats and their wonderful Neo Swing, but I'm super excited. I've even got my Iron Maiden t-shirt on because it's taken me 30 years to be able to do this, to actually get and finish a metal mix. I've loved metal all my life. I grew up with it, early Deep Purple, early Maiden Priest. This is a central part of what I was listening to, along with Billy Joel and Vangelis and all this stuff. There was Iron Maiden, Run to the Hills. It's cool. The band we're going to be looking at here is Angel 7. They are from the shadow of Vlad's Hill, behind the great gates of Kiev, a Ukrainian act. Now, they're a three-piece. I have known Slava, the centre of the band, who does everything except guitars, for quite a lot of years from one of his side projects, an EBM industrial act, FHTH, who I've spoken about, blogged about, reviewed several times. I'm a big fan of what Slava does. I've kept an eye on what he's done with Angel 7 and been quite interested. He then showed a new track, Genghis Khan, and I really liked a lot of it, but I didn't love the mix. And based on our relationship and the fact that we have spoken, and he's been a really cool cat over the years, I reached out and I said, look, can I have another go? And him being a cool cat, he came straight back, yep. So I thought, can I have this as a mix walkthrough too? Air your dirty laundry. He came straight back and said, yep, and send over the artwork and everything. Good on you. That's rock and roll. That's how this game should be played. Be open. So, Genghis Khan, Angel 7, he always does nice covers. You'll get a closer look at that later. Right, so we look at, as I normally do in these situations, a before and after. Now, I actually did like most of Slava's mix. It was really in the vocals where I kind of came unglued. So let's start with his mix and compare the pair of them. We start with a nice, almost Gary Moore kind of a thing, with the guitars and a really nice bright synth working against each other. You'll hear some slight tonal differences, but largely the same. We then get into a vocal part, which I think is about here.
For what is a man advantage if he gains the whole world and loses himself?
I found Slava's vocal mixing very dry. We then move into a a death growl. Somebody may be pedantic about it not technically being a death growl, but it's a death growl. Kind of a vocal. This in particular I found very below the mix and very dry. That was what I didn't love about the mix, and I felt like, that's not what I want to hear. And that's what I really set out to return differently, return the way that I saw it, that I felt it. The whole mix, it has flowed through on that, but if you've watched the Marina and the Cats video, you'll know all about how I feel about dry vocals. One thing I have noticed over and over is the guitarists and guitarist singers, and Slava's not the guitarist here because he's got a pair of them, Nikolay and Alexander, if I'm correct, and they do a beaut job. But they're prone to mixing their vocals low in the mix, whether it's because they're embarrassed about them, I don't know. But if you're unsure about your vocals, don't bury them in the mix, because it actually makes people more uncomfortable with the vocal. And that's not a good sign, because it doubles their concern about your vocal. If your vocal is, well, if you're not Rod Stewart or you're not Ronnie James Dio, that's okay. There are many, many very successful singers out there with quite poor voices. It's in the delivery, it's in the passion. Don't hide the passion. If you put yourself below the mix, you've hid the passion, and people start to go and they pay too much attention because they can feel what you're trying to hide. So I wanted to bring that up. So we had it pushes that intensity even more. I've brightened up his vocal, given it a lot more clarity, allowed it to push through the mix, and put a lot more space around it. So it actually brings it forward, which is where it needs to be, because this is telling a story about the ever-charming Genghis Khan and all the lovely things that he did to people. And that needs to come across. Otherwise, it is just a chugga 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 fest. And there are billions of them out there. This is a really nice chugga fest. Don't get me wrong, I love the guitar work in this. But it's in making it beautiful, in giving it a vastness, especially a song like this, which is about the vastness of Genghis and his background on the steppes. And his reach, ultimately, that he controlled empires. And so that needs to be vast, and reverb is a big part of creating that sense of vastness. We'll talk about the various decisions that I've made to back that view as we go through. You'll notice that my mix tends to be overall a bit brighter and a bit more delicate, but in some ways it's also warmer. Shinier, perhaps, and I know some people are offended by shiny, but they can take that wherever they want to. Oh, these bits I loved. I call them the creepy vocals. They're just great. You'll see that Slava's handled them sort of straight, fairly in the middle of the mix. Whereas I've actually pulled back. There's still probably more reverb on mine than there is on his, but I've pulled back a lot of the other processing, pushed them forward, and I've panned them right, because there are two sections. So I've moved them left and right. It's got kind of a creepy King Diamond sound to it, and I think it's really great. It definitely shouldn't be hidden. The fact that Slava's singing in here with three distinct voices, I think is really wonderful. How great his voice is, I don't know, and I think he actually undervalues his voice. I'd like to hear that open out more. I really would, because I think there's probably more there than he's giving himself credit for. But with the clean voice, especially if you could open that out a little bit more, the kind of death growl, if you can, again, open that out with a little bit more extension, and then this strange sort of gremlin-y King Diamond kind of a thing. It's very cool. It's nice to have that versatility, and allows him to use it. Overall, you may well have noticed his mix is pretty pinned. Mine is harder against the limiter than I would normally do, but there's still a lot more movement. So if we minimize this, we'll see it really sort of hits the stops a lot, which makes his mix lack dynamic. And again, because we're looking for grandness of empire, huge stage here, the problem with doing this loudness war approach is that while we get it blam right up your nose hairs, we don't have that sort of space to play with. So that couple of dB, I'm not sure what it is. I'd hate to think it was much more than a couple of dB. It could be 6 dB difference in how he's lopped the tops. It's part of why my mix sounds open, but my mix doesn't sound significantly quieter. So just when you're doing your mixes and masters, try to avoid this. I know it's been de rigueur, especially in EDM, but you can achieve what you're looking for with more dynamic space. So when you're listening, all the little ragged edges here, they're space. They help build a bigger space. That's basically it for this. We'll put that aside. Now, we will actually listen to the track. So it's Angel 7, Genghis Khan.
Gains the whole world and lose himself or be cast away. Far to the east, this story began. The truth was unbelievable legend.
Before
began. The truth was unbelievable legend. To the east, this story began. The truth was unbelievable legend.
There we go, Angel 7, Genghis Khan. That is my mix of their track. Again, really looking for big and grand and epic. And in my opinion, like overloud, very dry mixes don't get us there. I will now walk you through really all the decisions I've made. I'll try to do this quickly, but it's not a quick process. This mix I've spent 8 to 10 hours on, all up. So if I can get through this in about an hour, then I'm actually shaving a hell of a lot of that time off. First thing I will have to do is, not that one, is kill off our masters, because it's not right to go through and be doing this with the sense of our mastering environment on. So all of those are out of the game. We need this guy in, just on soft clip. Let's hear what we've got. Okay, fair enough. We're not going to hear a massive level difference here because the mix was quite hot all the way through, which is fair enough. First thing, as usual, is to arrange the material. Now, the biggest criticism I have of that part, and you know I end up saying this every time because every engineer loathes this when it happens, is that when the stems came across, actually I can probably show you how they came across. Now, in terms of stems, they're well organised. They're proper stems and all of that, so that is good. But the naming is a problem, because look, we've got, what are they? Now I know that that's the name of a collection of sounds, but I don't know what each of those instruments is. I have to listen to it to find out what it is, and then I have to rename it myself. Kind of not cool. You want to send that over saying brass, strings. And if you add another word that explains what it's for, then that can help guide your mix engineer as well. This is the one that really, really kind of got my goat, because when I import that, every single track, like it won't read kick, snare, toms, metalwork. It'll just read Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan. Oh, look, I need to work on the Genghis Khan track. And I know that sounds like me just being a bit of a bitch, but when you spend about an hour putting together a mix, the last one that I got, just to give you a comparison, because I didn't show it because it didn't need showing, was the Lewitt guys. This is what they send over. Initially you think, oh geez, that's complex, but you know what? It says 01 Vox, 01 background, 01, 04 snare. Their numbering is not the one I used, I rearranged them, but the info that's important is pretty well up front. That's the logic that they've used on their track order, but I can translate their logic into mine really quickly. So sorry, Slava, but really important, and this is not for you specifically, but for everyone, I say it almost every time, is that really look at the stems, the files that you're sending across, that they serve the purpose of the engineer. Because you want that engineer to open your project and go, oh cool, I can get into this, rather than open the project and go, oh, that's a pain in the ass. The next thing I had to do was a lot of editing on the vocals, and if you've read anything of my stuff, I don't like editing vocals. I did not alter timing or tuning. It was not necessary. And I wouldn't have done it anyway because I loathe doing it. I think it does more damage than good most of the time. But there were a lot of plosives where you blow the mic, where you and sometimes you can just clean those up with a high-pass filter, just get rid of all the that comes through. But they were quite loud, as in the recordings were here and plosives were here, which means that when I came to dealing with levels, those plosives were going to impact the way the levelometer worked, and I didn't want that. So in each case, I went through into the track. That's not the one. Sorry, trying to learn to use my buttons. There we go. You can see here how it's quite cut up. We'll just expand this and zoom in. Now again, this is considered very normal, but it's generally better. Where's your singing, Slava? I know it's in here somewhere. There we go. Let's see if we can find one. Here we go. There are some here. You can see the vocals cut up, and here's one bit here. So let's zoom in on it. A lot of modern mix engineers will take the, oh, well, I do everything approach. Okay, good on them. But I'm a mix engineer who specializes in what I'm good at, and I don't like to do what I'm not good at. So this kind of prep work is not for everyone. So try to do that yourself, because especially if you're paying by the hour, like if you were paying me by the hour, it'd be $55 an hour. Nothing, this is not for you, on you, Slava, but in general. If I'm spending an hour or 2 hours, I think, all up, between mix prep, getting before I could start to mix, with going through, knifing out, like using my razor tool to cut before and after the plosive, and then turning down the overall level, so bringing that down, so that rather than being, where was it, about there, see, it's just massively different from the vocal level. And pull it back to roughly the -15. Now at least it's evened out what is going to happen level-wise, and of course reduced the massive amount of bass that appears with a plosive. Try to do those things yourself, because if you were paying me the $55 an hour, that's my full rate, then that's $110 just for me to do this. That's kind of not what you necessarily want to achieve. So 2 reasons not to do it. 1, save the money yourself. Do it yourself. Not that hard. 2, if you're working with an engineer like me who's not an editor, Don't make them do what they don't want to do, because the first couple of hours that they work on your project, they're not enjoying themselves. Not a thing you want to do when you want them to be creative. So not personally at you, Slava, at all, or anybody. People take this personally, but this is about learning to be great at your craft. And one of the things you have to do in your craft is, if you're going to be the role of recording engineer, that means you probably need to be the role of tape op, who tidies the tracks up and makes them really nice and presentable. Because if you sent this off to Bob Clearmountain or Andrew Sheps or whoever, they may or may not be as direct as I'm being with you, but they're either going to send it off to somebody else and charge you for their time, or if they're blunt like me, they may have a hissy fit and throw it back at you and say, come back to me when you're ready. So my advice is about being professional and very strongly send over great work, because most of this is great work. There's a lot of lovely work in here, and again, especially from those guitarists, they've done lovely work, and that makes for a lovely mix. That's how you get it. So we've got all our tracks. Normally I do start from the vocal and work back, but because this is quite a different kind of a vocal, we've got let's just get this mixer back in the game. Let's just solo our vocals. I don't want this rack here. Oh, I hate having to work with one screen. I really do. So we should just hear vocals.
Advantage. If he gains the whole world and lose Stephen Winners. Good.
Obviously, this isn't like Hotel California. This is not a classic rock, lovely melodic singing. And it's scattered in bits and pieces, all very great for the delivery. Like, I've got no dramas with that. But normally I'd start with the vocals and build up our lovely vocal melody and everything, but this vocal doesn't behave that way, so I went the other way. And I started with our guitars. Actually, no, sorry, I started with our drums. So I'll do what I normally do, is mute everything that's not going to be used right now, and then we'll gradually open them up. Vocals, we will mute. The reason I'm having to use mutes rather than solos is because, where's my vocal main? There we go. Of the way that I'm handling reverb. Might as well get into that now. As you'll hear, I've got quite a lot of reverb going on here. And if you're thinking, geez, that sounds excessive, if you haven't already, go get the movie Rockstar, Mark Wahlberg. It's a tremendous movie. There are some seemingly lame things about it, especially the ending. Bloody grunge being better than metal. Jeez, what's wrong with you? But there's a lot of wonderful stuff inside that. If you pay attention to the detail, where they talk about things, but where he's in the studio, first goes into the studio to audition, they press pause and there's great big whole pile of delay and echo and what have you going past that. That's normal. It's not just done for the movie, because lots of other times where I've, watched the mixing of kind of thing. So it's not excessive. It may not be to your taste, but it is not excessive. Matter of fact, I've heard way more on some great records. The way this reverb is done is essentially the same as the one from Marina and the Cats. Actually, I will close that and do this way. No, not that one. That one. Which is, I've got a pair of sends. One is sending to what I've called reverb. Now, I stupidly left my fat head on top of this, so I'll spend a little bit more time in this one if you missed it in Marina. This is one of my devices. You'll see a few of my devices, and this is not about me going, oh, look, I'm going to show my devices to show how clever I am. I use them because I like them. I use them because I know them, and I made them to deliver the kinds of results that I want. It is deliberately not meant to be the world's smoothest reverb. It is a collection of taps, 2, 4, 6, 8, and then one mono one on the end as an extender, number 9. And it's designed with up to quite long time. So it's sitting at around 50 milliseconds here with each of these taps above, below, what have you. As you see, each tap set slightly differently for stereo, and the feedback for the taps, and then for the individual delay. The feedbacks here are actually set to 0 because if you looked on the desk, you'll see that these come back in on a channel, and then I'm using those sends to send back out here again. Very carefully, I will add, because it's incredibly easy to get to howl like a bastard. So that is the reverb. I've not used the high and low cuts on this because, to be honest, I don't love what I put in here. I was trying to be gentle. I think they were 6 dB and they're useless. But I've got this fella, which is a pair of synth style filters, tiny bit off the low, and I leave this quite bright in the default, in the template, and then always go and set the tone of this reverb to suit. There is also some EQ here. So I set my EQ fairly early. I decide this is the space I'm working in, and everything gets put through that space because it helps bring it together and create that sense of empire that we're working with. No LFOs on board this, so LFO duties are handled here. But the signal is split. It comes in here, it's split. One is sent to this chain, the other is sent to this one, which is a far more polite reverb. The RV7000 is a very clean, sedate, dry kind of a reverb. The two are pulled back in parallel and sent back out. That's my reverb. So we've got a coarse reverb with lots of character and movement in it, from LFOs going all over the place. You can't actually see it, but it is happening. And then a rather plain vanilla reverb, but the two of them together to form my reverb. And at the same time, the send is going to this delay, which again, the template's quite long. I pull it down to suit the track. Being metal and the fact that it gets into speed metal elements, then we can't have much of a long thing, because otherwise it just jumbles up. As always, not synced. I avoid synced delays like the plague because they end up with everything being exactly the perfect place. If I think I need to find out where the right place is, I'll load in another device that allows me to put it to to where I think with BPM sync, switch across, find out what that is in milliseconds, and then move my timing there. Tiny bit of feedback on this, and again, remember that's being fed back, so the reverb when it comes in is being sent to the delay, with the delay when it comes in is being sent to the reverb on their bus, so my effect bus. So those two are my room send, and because there's quite a lot of devices doing their separate things, we end up with quite a thick sound. So rather than feeling you have to go out and buy some fancy expensive reverb, this is all they're doing. They've just got more stuff going on. So there's my reverb. Kick. Now this kit took me a couple of goes to work it out, and I asked Slava, and he came back and said, yeah, it's a sample system. And I'd started to think, well, at least these kick and snare are samples. They just don't sound like real room recordings. And that's okay, but I want them to feel that way. The toms the same. This came in labelled as overheads, which is perfectly correct, but I just wanted to be really clear on what I was doing with it, and to me it's just the metal work, all the bits of tin that they're whacking. But it also came in with this, which is a kind of ambience track, so together we're giving ourselves the illusion of something like a kit through a kit in a room, but it's a very polished. Real kits through real rooms don't sound like this. So I've sent the whole thing to my reverb space that I've created. So if we go back to looking at our mixer with so it's created more of a room sense. I've said this is the space we're going to work in. Whether it's real or not real, this is the space I want us to work in, and I've majored in that. So the kick, all of these things are largely pretty simple. Because they're already pre-processed sounds, it's not like I need to be doing a ton of stuff with them. Slava was really good. Right at the beginning with that, my even having to ask him, he sent me the BPM, the tempo of the track. Didn't actually need it, but I'd rather have it. I'd rather be there in the first place. And he sent me the tonality, so that the key scale of the track, A minor, so it's an A. So with this kick, I wanted to build some beef into this, because it's Genghis Khan, it's manly, it's beefy. And I knew there was going to be a lot of brightness, so I checked the bass and there wasn't a ton of which is fine, because in metal you need it to be fast. It needs to speak fast, so that means you're not messing around at 60 hertz. Whereas the kick, I could a bit. So I did my math. A 22 down an octave is 110, down another octave is 55. So I gave it a little bit of punch at 55. Bright, very drum machine processed perfect sound. That puts a little bit of woof in it. But it becomes too woofy in the total mix. I'd already set this up, knowing that I was probably going to need to turn it on, but I kept it off. Once I'd got the mix happening more, it was like, yep, that's got to go on. So you'll see when it's on and off, it just moves the total amount of apparent boost above where we were in the first place by a couple of dB. It's deliberately a narrow point. I'm picking the fundamental of this piece and going quite pointy with my point, and just saying, here, I'm going to emphasize so we hear a little bit of that frequency resonate. You can go right up here and it will start to sound like an 808 bass and howl like a bastard, and you'll have major problems mixing your piece, but you don't need a lot. You'll see a lot of my EQ moves where I'm working on this kind of stuff are quite subtle. You only need a tiny amount just to push that through to say, here's the bass of my piece, here's the fundamental of my piece. That was my kick drum. Snare. We just don't need what's going on down here. So all it's doing is interfering with our kick drum, which needs to be clear because of the egg beatery stuff that's going to happen. So get rid of it. I've given a little bit of boost here, and I've chosen this frequency very deliberately, even though you may go, oh, but that's kind of ugly. It's like, yes, we want that to spear through the mix, and in the faster styles of metal, it's quite common, as we hear here, for that snare to have very little of the snarey, the metal springs business, and to have more shell. So it's top and shell, skin and shell sound. So I've actually picked out the shell sound and driven it a bit. It's probably not exactly the same place as it was before, but picked out that shell sound and said, yep, let's pull that through. That makes it sound more like a real drum, because real drums in real rooms, you hear a lot of the shell resonance because that's picked up by the room. So that helps it cut through and makes it sound a bit more unique than a sample. It's only minor. We don't want to do too much with it. Toms. I love toms. Same game. Just a little bit of EQ to find out where are they going, what are they doing. It does have quite a long tail on it, but I don't have a problem with that. That's good. Again, I found a shell tone that I like. See there in the lower tom, you can really kind of hear that shell vibrating. And because I've boosted here, then we really don't want to have too much happening down here, because we've got our kick drum working down there. Toms are about richness in the mids, so that's where I've given them that boost. And look, 220. So that's using our tonality of our piece. This is an emulation of overhead mics. So where you have one or two mics over the kit, which will predominantly pick up the metalwork, hi-hats, cymbals, all of that kind of stuff. But it will naturally pick up spill from the rest of the kit. I haven't gone to getting rid of that spill. I like spill. Spill helps make something sound more like it's happening in the room. The spill in a sample-based situation is not going to be the same as the spill from a room, especially where if we looked at the Marina kit, which was real drums in real room with real mics, they were using, Lewitt used several different mics for different things, and it's the combination of those different mics and their different flavors that when you put them together helps create that sense of a room, phase cancellations, all that kind of technical stuff. But I've pushed this here. Just to bring those through. It doesn't need a lot of toppy, and I do some of that later, but I just want to pick out where they're really going to punch through, and we're not going to have too much conflict with our other instruments. That felt right there. And then this, which I did nothing with. I pulled it back in the mix just a little bit. I considered killing it off altogether, but we do end up with a drum machine-y kind of a sound. So the place where this came out of, and I'm deliberately not telling you because this is not an advert for or against this sample set and player system, it does actually help. If you haven't got access to a real drummer in a real room with real mics, then this system that they use does better than just putting together dry samples. Now, it's not to say that I couldn't have created a complete fake room around it, but the fact that it was there meant that I worked with it. I used the combination of my room and their room, just to give us that sense of, yeah, this exists in this space. That was it. I was very happy with the drums. Oh, except for this. You'll see I use this guy a lot. I like it. It's got its issues when you first turn it on. I do not like the default settings. I spoke to the dev about it and he studiously ignored me. Way to go. Fair enough. Probably just thought it was a pain in the ass. Because these are processed sounds, we really don't want to be doing too much to them because they're just going to sound even more processed. I like the sound that I've got, so I'm giving a little bit of drive, which just gives us a little bit more presence on that, bit of saturation, and a tiny bit of shaving some off here. Now what this is doing is actually pressing this ambience, the room sound, it's pressing that into the individual samples. So the individual samples are too clean, too processed for a real room recording, which makes them sound like samples. This ambience that's been put there, and if it wasn't there, I would have put it there myself. We're then pressing into this. So when the compressor reacts to the kick, it's reacting to the reverb as well as it squashes it all together, but not a lot. Generally about a dB, because we're going to do more to that later. So while at this point it's very tempting to go, oh yeah, minus 12 dB, and you'll regret it later. That's it, drums, delighted with them. Done their job. Bass. I don't know for sure what this is, but I'm assuming this is a sample as well. It seems too clean and too precise for a player. Not that a player can't play like this, but again, it's just got that sample feel to it. Not a problem. Don't care where things come from. I only care about the results. As I said, not exactly majoring in bass on this. That's fine. It's got to cut a mix, a busy mix. So I experimented with 2 different boosts. One at 110 because I had our kick at 55, our toms at 220. So octave, 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 put the bass in the middle. But it just, once the mix busied up, it wasn't working. So went up. Now that means that when this is playing its root note, the second harmonic is being pulled out. We hear that second harmonic and as being kind of loud, and the ear reconstructs the levels of these lower harmonics, therefore turning them up. Go figure. Psychoacoustics, brilliant stuff. The more you understand that, the easier it is to mix. So it's a bright sound. At one stage I had this pulled down. When we're just working with the bass and drum mix, then it's the right decision. Once we've got it into a busy mix with guitars and what have you, it needed to go. So don't get welded to your EQ decisions when you're working with solo or part of the mix. And I only ever work with solo, not as much as I'm showing you here. I'll bring the sound up in solo. So like, okay, I'll show you what I do. So I have... That's it. I'm focusing on the sound that I'm working with, and I'll throw it back in the mix. There's no point making an amazing sound in solo, and the whole thing falls to pieces when you put it in the mix, because they don't tie together. Really important that sounds tie together, especially if they've come from separate sources. If they've been pulled in from this sample library, that sample library, it's quite different from when you had 4 guys with bad haircuts and terrible Liverpudlian accents going, oh, because those sounds have all come from the same place. So we have our rhythm section. Nice. I put the bass, or the drums, which are compressed, and our bass, which is not. If it were live recorded, I might have put a little bit of compression on it, but I might not. Seeing it's a sample, that's already been done to it. So they go into my rhythm bus. You'll see that I don't send the individual instruments off to my reverb, I send the bus off. Because what I'm looking to do is create this in a room. I'm not being producery. That's for 12-year-olds. What I'm being is focused on getting the result. And it's better to send from your bus, where you've pulled the things together and compressed them, than it is to send from each of your individual instruments, because you'll get a false outcome. Sometimes you might want to deliberately do that. And you'll see that I boost certain things. Like here with the lead vocal, I've boosted the send to the delay just a bit. But when you go to the main vocal track, you'll see that's where I've put the sends on. So what we've got coming up for our rhythm is drums and bass. The drums already have a little bit of compression, but I want to pull them together. these are naturally playing together because they're sequenced, so they're not going to be loosey goosey and trying to use compression to pull them together. I was going to say sidechain, but then you guys will think of entirely the wrong idea of what that means. But where you use the kick to help define the punch of the bass. Again, this is just a glue compression. It's not about levels, although it will influence levels. I did something just the other day, it was a showing of something pretty horrible actually, and the kick bass weren't really coming through the mix. First thought would be easy, oh yeah, we'll just turn them up, but knowing a lot better in the bass, put on my my Molot rack extension. Oh look, it's Russian. Good Russian compressor for good Russian band. Sorry guys, should grow up. Especially since you probably hate Russians because they aren't always kind to your country. But by putting them together through here, we're gluing them together, and that'll give us better punch. Better punch will make them sit better in the mix and push through that mix better. Haven't turned the volume up. We've still got the same transient level, but the body of the sound comes down so it gets tighter and pushes through. That's really all we're doing here. Again, about a dB, which means that our drum kit's got about 2 dB of compression on it. One on the drum kit, one on the rhythm bus. And that's carrying the bass into it as well, pressing them together. And then now I'm dealing with the pair of them together as a bus. While I love a warm sound, I really do, and I wanted this to be warm and big and fat, a big, clear, clean sound, even getting a little up into glassy, is really wonderful for intimacy. So once I'd got this big mix busier, I then gave this a little bit of a push, just a tiny push, not even 2 dB of push, at 8.5. You'll hear that in the final mix. You'll hear that some of the metalwork, the rides and cymbals and what have you, they come through just like chimes, and that's in part because of that tiny boost there on the rhythm bus. So my rhythm bus is rhythmically bussing guitars. So our guitar parts, we'll mute that for the moment. My kingdom for a guitar part. Oh, probably because again, guys, guitarists, if you've stuck with me this far, 51 minutes and counting, wonderful work. Love what you do. Would be delighted to work with you sometime directly if you're ever interested in doing something different. Or if I'm looking for a guitarist, I really have to try and remember to reach out to one or both of you guys, because you work together really nicely. So we've got guitar left, guitar right. Embarrassing thing, when I first started mixing this, I had them backwards. I actually liked it. I really did. And it would be worth considering doing a mix with them backwards. But I'm not saying it was right, so I'm staying with the left and right the way they should be. We've got the clean section at the beginning, and then our solos. So we'll mute everything so that we're working with the one thing, but we'll keep our drums in as they should be. Oh, wrong place. Actually, I'll do this one first, seeing I'm here. This is the sound, probably the single sound that I had the biggest issue with, because if we listen, we're We're told it's a clean guitar, but it's not. Obviously, it's a lot cleaner than the other guitars, but it's got a lot of crunch on it, and I don't love that about it. So I've gone quite aggressively on the EQ. And warmed it up. This was the one where I felt like I had to match the tone of this to the rest of the piece. So if we look here, the tones match better than this. The darker tone helps me pull out some of that crunchy static sound, and it stays darker and mysterious, and therefore kind of relates to the lower end of those when they come in. Using the brighter side of it, it emphasizes the staticky thing, and then takes us to the top of those guitars when they come in, so we're hearing more of the sort of frayed, distorty sound on them, which gives us not such a good feel for them. They're good tones, but the fact that where we're asked to hear is different. You know, what's good about muted guitars is those low mids, the chug, not that up on top. And with this being bright, especially seeing it had that in it already, it just kind of put us up there. It's like meeting a beautiful woman and focusing only on her flaws rather than the positives, the overall goodness. So they're the two reasons why I've changed your tone quite dramatically on that. And in the mix, when we come to it, you'll see that there is a bright synth. So the bright synth handles the brightness, the brilliance that you're looking for there. So that was a tricky one. To get some of its character back, this is one of the only times where I did this in the mix, you'll need to have pretty subtle gear to be hearing that, but I've just given quite a big boost up in the air. There's not a lot up there, but I've given quite a big boost in that. Cut some more of those mids and just given it some saturation, just to try to recreate some vibe in that sound, seeing I have had to brutalize it. But I'm pleased with the result that I got, and that's what matters. It's all about getting the results that you feel you need. And then we bring in guitar left. So they're going into our reverb again through the bus, but I've also put an echo on them. We might actually go up and, for the moment, just kill off these. I'll just remember to put them back. So this is what I've got. Nice stuff. Really nice stuff. It's even playing. Timing's nice. It's not machine perfect, which is really good. I hate machine perfect. It's funny to say that as a synth composer who works with the mouse, but with this, it's got to be vibrant, it's got to be live, it's got to, and it does that. And as we get the two of them together, they really do that. But it's dry. The guys haven't, for whatever reason, and there's no argument here, there's nothing worse than being sent over, like 87 pedals all switched in, and you're like, I can't work with that. So it's come over, it's dry, their basic tone is really good. So where that's come from, I don't know. I don't know whether that's off, the guitarist's personal tone, or whether Slava's set those tone and just sent me the prints. Don't care, they're great. But dry. Again, this is one of my own devices. I could have used the Echo, the official one, but these sound different. And I wanted that feel. These somehow add a little bit of grit that the Echo kind of doesn't. Plus, the Echo reduces the overall level. These are designed to add to the level. Swings and roundabouts, but I do get frustrated when I add reason-based effects like the Echo, and then suddenly my overall level's gone down. It got quieter. Whereas these, they're adding. I'm adding some delay, so I want to add to my signal. It's just the way I think. Again, no options for BPM on this. Curse of the devil. Not the cool devil, the bad devil. I've tied these together so they're actually set up to the same time. I just looked for something that felt comfortable. As it played, but this has an offset, so it's taking the right channel and slowing it down. Now this is the left guitar, so it's over on the left, but if we look at the panning, actually I'll put our reverbification back on before I forget. If we look at the panning, I'm at 75% over there, not 100% over there. Because, and I hear a lot of mixers like this, when you pan things hard, like right to the very edge, where you're plastering their face up against the wall, you got your leg up against Tipton's head and he's like, "Ugh." The problem is there's no space down the side. While you think by panning out like this, I'm making this great big wide stereo sound, it's going to be huge, man, you're actually reducing your soundstage. I know. A lot of things about mixing and art in general, life in general, are not going to work straight down the line. Don't hard pan those bastards, unless you're doing it really deliberately. And if you're doing it deliberately to get a wide soundstage, don't hard pan them. You can actually get a wider soundstage with your guitarists in here, and delays and reverbs around them. Because when we've got poor Mr. Tipton's head jammed up against the concrete wall on this side, there is no space for reverb to come round here. So his head and his guitar being over here, it's hard being backwards, means that that's the edge of the soundstage. There's nothing around him. You've now defined your soundstage as being this wide. Whereas when you put your instruments here and let your reverb be out here, your soundstage will feel more like infinitely left-right. Go figure. It's just the way it works. So, being my left-handed guitar, I've set my delay timing on the left, and then I've latened it, dragged it back a little bit for the right hand. So it's going to appear on the right hand, but it's going to appear a little behind time, which gives the guy who's playing on the right primacy, dominance, because he gets there first. But there's still a little bit of echo. There's a bit of spill. Remember, we're creating a room here. There's a bit of spill there from the left-hand guitarist coming over on the right and the right on the left. This particular fellow has left and right delays, also got 3 more taps. One that's an average of these 2 numbers. One that's moved back and one that's moved forward. The back and forward are panned left and right, and the other one's in the middle. So I can move the amount of panning or time between the left and right with my diffusion knob. In this case, it's taking the right hand side and pulling it closer. So each time this part, the diffusion, the reverby parts of this echo happen, then the echo actually moves in a little bit, whereas on this side, the echo actually progressively travels further out. I know that'll really upset your BPM lockers, because the delays move around, which is exactly what they're meant to do. They're modulated here. Both of them got a fair amount of the old wobble on them. I've kept the level of the diffusion reasonably low because I know I've got my reverb room. You don't want to overdo that. And it doesn't want to swim. So it's less than 50%, just a bit of that. Yes, it's a bit reverby as such, but overall we've now got this huge guitar sound. Once we put the second one in, which is Guitar Mr. Right, which we're not going to see, there's some kind of bug. It's a similar version. Well, we'll just have to look at this. What this does is essentially the same thing, but it doesn't have the diffusion taps. It's just a straight stereo. But this one, it's got tone controls, top and bottom, and they're again synth filters, and the feedback you can choose between normal straight internal feedback, which means that the tone controls are only used after the feedback, or you can feedback after the tone controls, which means that the tone controls get more powerful as you go, which is the much nicer way of doing it. That's the option that I've used. I've tuned my timing for the right hand side. Too hard. This is my right hand. And then lagged it on the left hand side and given it a bit of modulation and a little bit of mix. So yes, some echoey and a little bit of woo, but overall we've got this big sound, and the fact that the echoes and reverb can come at us round the side as well has expanded our soundstage past where your speakers are to, 180 or whatever. It's big. That's all you care about. It's big. Clean we've handled, and then we've got our solo guitar, which is going to play, well, it starts playing here. You'll see I didn't play with tone on the other guitars. They were great. I didn't need to touch them. This one, I really wanted to spear through the mix. Nothing wrong with his tone there at all. It is really nice. But once I get it into the mix, I want to provide a few little pokes to get it through and to make it beautiful. So seeing it's playing up here more than down here, or the other way around if we were really guitarists, we know I got that backwards. But because there's not a lot, it's not dominant down here, I've just rolled that back a little bit. I haven't got rid of all of it. You can make guitars sound horribly thin if you start doing this. Sometimes it's the right call, but it's easily the wrong call. But you can do things like this. Take a couple of dB off. They lose primacy, they lose dominance, and so the masking effect will mean that they're still there, but the other things will sit on top of them. You've got to check that in your mix, but don't rush into hacking the bottom off, or you can have problems. I've pushed through in the 1K, that's right in the middle, in the ugly band, the bit that nobody says they want to hear, but you know what? That will spear it through the mix, and offset that with a little bit of boost up at 10. Not a lot, but these little boosts while they don't give you a massive change in tone, within the mix, they make this guitar really bright, really glossy, a thing that we want to look at. Ooh, look at the pretty shiny light. That's beautiful. Again, I can't show you because the bug is happening. It didn't happen yesterday. I had a really good day. It was not causing me any grief. See if we can force it open by opening the other one. Sometimes... there we go, yeah. If this one's open, it seems happy. If not, it just doesn't run. I don't know what the problem is. I live with it. So we've EQ'd our lead guitar. Now we've got He does have some kind of effect, some delay or something or other there. But I want to add a bit more. So same process here. I've moved this guy slightly to one side as I'd moved the guitar slightly to the other, the clean guitar to slightly to the other side. Leads down the center can be really good, like you've got a punk band or something like that. Probably lead down the center. But you've got a more interesting complex mix like this, I'll tend to move the lead out to one side. Often for me, rhythm stuff will tend to be on the left, my left, and leads will tend to be on the right, my right. Because that fits with our psychology, past, future. Leads are leading us somewhere. But you've got to look at your story. Sometimes it's best to do them the other way round. Depends what else you've got in your mix, but your leads are about telling a story. Make sure that you position them so they can tell your story. Don't want that to be dramatically over there, but just a little bit of over there, because it gives space for the rest of the mix to push through here and gives it dominance or primacy over wherever you've moved it to. So made it nice and glossy, given a little bit of the old echoey thing. In this case, it's just essentially a mono echo because that one's tied. I've put the tone controls into the feedback path and a stereo modulation, which gives us a bit more width overall. Not a big mix, but that wraps around and makes that guitar sound really big. It's really big, it's really glossy, it's very full. Lovely, lovely. Guitars go into a bus. Initially, nothing was done to them, but I put them in a bus because I know that I can then lift the level up and down, or if I need to do anything to the guitars as a block, I can do. Once I had this all together, all the bits and pieces, they started to sound a bit full and a bit boxy. So I've just taken that back. As you see, it's only like a dB, but it's enough not to make it thin. You don't want to make these thin because I want them to be warm and big and mean, but you don't want them to be boxy and to be... Can't remember at what point I did this, but I gave them a little bit of cut at Again, just part of that really nice and glossy. Actually, I think I may have done that early on as I was working with the left-right, the main guitars, and said, okay, collectively we're going to make you nice and kind of glossy here. It's the beginning of the air frequency, but I did roll off a little up here because I don't want them to own the whole mix. Guitars shouldn't be too bright. You want them to feel bright, but they shouldn't be too bright. So with that tiny shelf cut there, again, it's 2 dB, we're allowing those rides and what have you to come through unimpeded, which gives them that chime-like quality. Guitar's done. Now there are a few extra bits and pieces. Synth. Great sound. I just really speared it through where it was going to sound the prettiest. It doesn't want to fight with the guitars. It just wants to be there to add a texture, and in this case, a sense of light. We're shining a light with that sound. Very, very nice. The Synth Chorus 1. Synth Chorus 1 is here. Not quite sure where it's from. Nice. Could have been Humana. If this started Life in Reason, you'll notice that I've filled that out quite dramatically. So we'll turn off its things that have been done and work our way through them. This is a thing that a lot of people who play with synths and sample sounds don't really stop to think of doing. It's why a lot of bigger synths have so many effects on them, and it becomes a problem because those effects aren't suited to the mix. They're suited to the sound designer when he's playing this sound alone. So they sound brilliant, but they can cause problems. But you can fill out and pad out your sounds and bigify your sounds without causing a problem in your mix because it's context. So this was in the mix, but I'll solo it so you can hear it clearly. Obviously it goes through the reverb. Yep, same sense settings. First thing, polar. This is a straight pitch shifter. A lot of people kind of get the wrong idea of this. They think that, oh, this is supposed to be a perfect pitch shifter, that you should be able to, do everything in real time with it. Nah. Reason's given us a beautiful pitch shifter in the sequencer. That's when real time matters. This one's slow as a bastard, actually. But I've got the dry signal coming through. I've then given us about 5 cent drop, 5 cent boost on the second shifter. Little bit of feedback, not too much, but a little bit of feedback, tiny bit of delay there, and a tiny bit of delay there. So it means that these echoes are delayed anyway because there's a lot of lag, a latency in this, which is fine. I don't fight it. That latency means that our phases are all jumbled up with each other. That sounds bigger. If they were all perfectly together, it would actually thinify itself. Start to flange. And while I love a good flanging, there's nothing worse than when you're flanging things that you're trying to make bigger. I've panned left and right for my pitch shifts, taken some off their level, because when you hard pan them out, I know in Reason that they go up 3 dB. So kept my levels there. Tiny bit of LFO movement, not too much. If you've got a lot of LFO movement, it becomes chorusy and swishy rather than big. So we've now made this an immense sound. My echo nest is next. Yes, it takes its time, but hear how it adds so much bulk, including body, into that sound. You'd think that this had filters on it. It just really bulks up that sound, as well as carrying it forward in time, because one of the concerns, especially with sample things and traps for the unwary, is that you can end up with really dry, really quick sounds with no actual release on them. And so this has given a lot of release, a lot of carry through time to that sound, because when that comes in, it lost its EQ. It's about time and passage and grandness. I haven't mixed it quite as loud as Slava did. I've let it hang back in the mix. Yes, possibly I could have been a little bit brighter, maybe given it a bit of the old... But I kind of didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be warm and to almost have a sense of menace. A church choir can be beautiful and heavenly and our salvation, or it can be menacing. I wanted to walk a fine line in there so that we're not really judging Genghis as to whether he was a good guy or a bad guy or not. It's just power. Then we've got brass. This was one of the orchestra named sounds. This is one that is very dry and very sort of on-off. It stinks of MIDI. And being a man who loves MIDI, it's like, yeah. So it's gone into our reverb. It's also gone through this strange processor of mine, which is 3 bandpass filters, like synth bandpass filters, ganged together. So signals just split out and sent to each one in parallel. The tone is actually a resonator, so it's a short delay line, and you can increase the number of echoes, of feedback on that, which is a resonator, which is essentially what a guitar cabinet and speaker do. They add that kind of whine to your sound, and then a way of mixing it. The idea with that is to try to impart some unique character on those samples. They are just too sampley and too flat. They're too MIDI. So that imparts some character on them by putting some odd frequencies on them. It makes them behave differently. As I say, kind of like putting a guitar through a cabinet. Suddenly it seems more real than something just jacked into the desk. Used our leveler to just kind of squash that all together a little bit, because the frequencies can get a little unruly with a resonator, and a little bit of EQ. Subtle, just pulling out some of the middle. I did not want that brass to overawe the choir at all. I didn't even want the brass necessarily to be audible. I've pulled it up so it just backs that synth choir sound. So you get the sense of majesty without the feeling of, oh, we've suddenly gone orchestral. Not there's anything wrong with that. Rings. Again, awfully MIDI, very flat. On its own, not a particularly elegant line. And I sort of wondered, it's like, where are we going with this? But once you've been listening to the piece, it's actually, whether deliberately intended or not, it actually fits a rather Eastern sound or style. So it sits really nicely, but I did need to add a lot of this to echo it out so that the sounds weren't quite so... It's important that it flows, otherwise it doesn't feel real. In terms of EQ, again, sort of let's just get rid of some of the murk here. Let's have some of its clarity come through the mix. That's it, done on that. Music ended up with a bus for itself, so all the music that we've heard so far goes to the bus. And that was because at the beginning of the vocal, which we're about to handle, I added, because where Slava starts the spoken part, I've just added a little bit of a drop. So I've just ducked the music mix just a little bit, just to help that voice come through naturally. Doesn't come through naturally. I had to make it come through, but we can have it come through naturally, and it feels that way, and that's good. Then it's into the voices, and I know this is long, but Remember, as I said, there's 8 hours gone into this mix. Lead vocals, clean. I had to decide which I was going to make the lead vocal. None of them were named, but I decided this one would be because it starts with our speechification. All mutes off, there we go.
The whole world and lose himself. For what is a man advantage if he gains the whole world and lose himself?
You just gotta love the accent on it. It's superb. So Slava, if you worry about, oh geez, my accent's thick, it's good. It's great. It's a character thing. So don't feel like you should lose it, or at least not in a hurry. EQ wise, I've just given him air.
Or be castaway. Far to the east, this story began.
Now, between the parts, between the lines, you will hear a little bit of bars, a little bit of room. I am not keen on cutting those off. I say this over and over again. Very easy to say we must end up with a pristine, perfect thing. That's when you end up with a sterile thing. Let those things be there. Because if we were in this room, this world where this stuff's happening, there'd be all kinds of noises happening. You know, soldiers grunting, farting, snoring, frogs chirping, all kinds of things would be in that world. If we make our world deprived of this thing, you know, we very carefully exfoliate to kill off the frogs. We mute all our soldiers. We end up with a sterile world. And sterile worlds don't emote anywhere near as a rich world, which is why Tolkien's Lord of the Rings is just, it's the standard bearer for alternate worlds, because it's so rich. The Song of Tom Bombadil, nobody's ever read the damn thing, but the fact that it exists makes that story richer. Harry Potter, not the world's best written book or books, but you know what, it's great because it's a really rich world that we've been given. The fact that she's added Quidditch, she's made up ridiculous game, that layer of texture makes things work. As for you thinking, oh, it's silly talking about frogs and soldiers farting and belching and what have you, watch a movie with soldiers and what have you. Quite common that you will see scenes of exactly that, because it adds texture to the film. So don't feel that you should immediately be reaching for gates, or if you are, do them very carefully. Where I was ever so slightly concerned that it might be a bit much, I just did what I showed you at the beginning, was razor, turn the volume down. Take 6 dB off, loses primacy, it will disappear in the mix and yet add to your texture. So the lead vocal here is just EQ to punch it through, give it nice clarity. The clean vocals go to a bus. You'll see the clean vocal bus doesn't go anywhere. A couple of these vocals, the lead vocal, I've given it more of the echo in my sends, and Vox 4 I actually gave it more of the reverb. Just suited what was happening. But the bus that these guys go to,
Central Cross, underneath, far to the east.
I'm not looking to turn the volume up, or I gave it a little bit of drive just to put some brightness, some shine on that with a little bit of saturation, but just shaving off a dB here, because remember on the masters we're going to do that again. So just quite simple, not aggressive.
This story began. Central Cross, unbelievable legend.
I've used this guy rather than mine because I've used my delays all over the guitars. We need the voices to have a different tonality, a different sound to them, otherwise they will glob together. So I've used this fellow because I know it's cleaner overall, and I'm not needing to add level because I actually normalized all these vocals because they came in quite quiet. I would, to be very clear, very simple, normalized the whole lot, so they were loud. So I got no problems with feeling I need to add level. I needed to power soak some away. So my echo, again, just done on timing. So work that out, warm it up a little bit, diffuse it out a little bit. Did not use the stereo LFO because that's just going to sound woozy and odd on vocals, but a bit of the wobble, the tape wobble will work nicely. Overall EQ for the clean vocal obviously never got used. Wasn't needed. The vocals were delivered nicely. Whether Slava had EQ'd, I'm not sure, but they were delivered nicely, bar those plosives.
Central Cross, I'm a living legend.
It's basically the same thing all the way through. We've then got what he called his extreme vocals, so these are the death growly kind of things. You'll see that, with his backing vocals, I took what was going to be his main vocal. That ended up becoming a stereo track just because of the delay. I would have put a tiny bit of... Actually, what made that stereo? I don't know, probably just because that effect was in... That technically made it stereo. It's not stereo. But I've taken his backing vocals, and I think they were different takes, but I think he may have copied and pasted his take, like done his take, this bit here, once, and copied and pasted them down the path. Not my favourite way of doing it, but I think that he's done a different take here and a different take here, so it's 3 takes on top of each other, and then they're copied down the path. That's better. It's far better than doing one take, copy, because then they're all exactly the same. Right on time. Don't do it. It is much nicer if you can do so that this is unique, 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 this is unique. If you can't do it that way, then this is not a bad way of doing it. It's my third choice. My second choice would be to do one here and then do another one, and then you can alternate them or jumble them up somehow. Same here, so that you don't end up with the same pairing every single time, because that sameness causes us to turn off, because we go, yeah, I've heard that. That's not interesting anymore. It's not unique anymore. I'm looking for new information, exciting things. And if these are the same essential block every single time, and I'm guessing here, but I think I spoke to Slava and he did suggest there was some copy and paste in here. If that block is the same as this block, we start to minimize its importance in our minds. So if you are struggling to do unique for each of these, at least try and do 2, so that next time we hear this, it's not the same as the last time we heard it. That you mix and match them around if necessary. Not by just going, oh, well, I'll swap that to there because they're still the same. You just fooled yourself. That's cool. So we get into the...
Stepping horses, run like a stone.
Cool. This was really where I was concerned with Slava's mix, because these were dry and under the mix. So his extreme mixes, the individual tracks, I did nothing with. They've gone to the shared bus.
Stepping demons, give birth warriors.
Just that little bit of leveling just to beef it up and make sure that it stays controlled. Quite a bit of drive in this case on this one, because death growls can tend to... They close the throat so we can lose the air. And then that can make them sit more difficult to sit in the mix and have clarity, which may be part of why they seem to go under the mix. But we want to add a little bit of air, so... little bit heavy-handed on the drive there, just to add some overtones there. Give us some air to...
Step on arrows!
You'll notice when I A-B'd at the beginning that the vocal sounded a lot brighter with me. That's part of it. EQ's part of it, that's part of it as well. I've used the Echo Nest to add our...
Don't know message! Children of steps are wild and fearless.
It's a nice kind of a vocal, but as you hear when it's dry, it's very clipped. And big scary things echo through time. And vocals that echo through time become more lyrical. And so that's what this does. It echoes this.
His name was Genghis Khan.
And that makes him bigger. When Slava sings that, he's like... He becomes enormous, which is good because he's meant to be. So that's just that same process of echoes left and right. The right is actually reducing in time. The diffusions are extending in time. A little bit more level there. And this is 100% wet because remember that one doesn't have tone controls. So the magic of reason and bussing. Bit of cut top and bottom. Tiny bit of drive overall. Again, just pushing it forward a little bit. And that's given us that sound. And then EQ. I have rolled off.
He was the shaker of empires.
Because we've got a lot going on in the mix and there isn't actually much of importance with that mix down there. Tiny boost here and 280. That's actually where I've pulled the guitars back a dB. This has gone forward a dB because the woodiness, the richness there actually works nicely. And then we've got to pull that clarity through. It's up at 12. It's only a couple of dB or 1.5 dB, but we do need that to come through in the air. So we've created some air with a little bit of drive, and we're pulling that through there because it's important that come through and people feel like it's clear. My partner Jane first listened to it and she's like, "Oh, what's wrong with those vocals? Why I can't hear them?" And that's the reaction you don't want to have. So, extreme vocals. Now these mostly came in pairs. So I've panned them just ever so slightly left and right, and then when he's backed himself again with number 3, I've put that in the center. So it just adds a little bit of movement. We don't really want to be noticing that. Then we get to, so that's put all the growls in one place. Then we get to these extreme ones. These are ones that are actually, I call them creepy. I didn't do anything at the vocal. I actually took them out of the main vocal thing to reduce the amount of processing that they were getting. So they're not getting the all of this echo on them. I didn't want that on them. It did not help them. They're not the clearest vocally.
The fire and flame from town. Towns and villages are in the smoke. Those who resist must choke.
So they get the reverb. Actually, if we we'll do that and that'll get us.
The survivor, the fire and flame from charred. Towns and villages are in the smoke. Those who resist must choke.
They are great stuff. I love them. But I took them, as I said, and panned them. So they were in pairs. Good on you, in pairs. They do look unique performances, so that's good. You can see here, none of these match, which is great. And I've panned most way over, again, not all the way over, most way over, and a bit of the way over. 70 and 30 makes 100. I like making my numbers balance up. And the same for the other. So you hear them with our vocals.
The fire and flame from charred. Towns and villages are in the smoke. Those who resist must choke. The survivors been put bondage. Far to the east.
So we moved around because the song's quite long, and this is very long. So by moving them around and the fact that they're a different sound, they're a real character sound, which is great to actually move character vocal sounds around because they add all this movement, and that's wonderful. Again, Slava, brilliant for having 3 vocal sounds in the track. Again, I would love to hear, especially with your clean and the death growl stuff, to extend your notes a little bit. Don't feel like you have to shorten them up. If you really don't have a voice, and I think you've got a better voice than you think you do, then with this quality of work, I think it's worth investing a couple of your pay dollars that haven't gone into vodka into some vocal lessons. Not with someone who trains little girls to try to be singers. Stay away from them like the plague. Find someone who's a real vocal coach, somebody who's actually doing it and doing it well, and supplementing their income by training real singers to do what you do. Some of them will be classically trained, some of them won't, some of them will be people who've just had this training themselves, but find someone who helps you to extend that. You'll find that it's then more comfortable to do the death growl stuff, because I know how challenging that actually is to do. I did it myself when I was younger. And that will allow you to open your voice out, and I think we'll get a little bit more of the Bruce Dickinson, not really King Diamond, because it's not in your voice, but we'll get a little bit of that opening up and allow you to be a little bit more melodic there. That really is all our parts. That's everything that we've got, and so together we end up with...
Towns and villages are in the smoke. Those who resist must choke. The survivors people bondage.
So that brings us just to the last bit, which is in many ways the least important bit, but it's important, it has to be done. And that's our mastering. So for the moment, we have actually been running hotter than I would have wanted, but so be it. I wouldn't have mixed this way normally, but I can't see on one monitor. So the first thing I'll do is I'll turn the saturation.
7 horses run like a storm.
Because it gives that extra sort of lift. Again, I'm experimenting with this.
7 arrows, no measure. Children of steps are.
Hear how that really clarifies. Now, at the moment, it's actually been hammering into the soft clip on this limiter, which is not good practice, but it does sound quite good. Now, initially, we've clarified a lot. We've got quite a lot of compression happening in this. Which is fine with me because that's kind of muddy and icky. So we've got quite a bit happening there, but it does allow this to clarify, and that makes it brighter, cleaner, shinier. So that's a good thing. The saturation's gone in. EQ did. Apart from rolling off the unneeded sub rumbles, nothing's done. It's interesting using a multi-band compressor, and see I'm not changing any levels anywhere, and nor is the auto makeup on. I know people say, oh, you put the auto makeup on, and it's like, yeah, I don't like it. Maybe I'll learn to, but I don't like it. But there's less need for EQ. Interesting. That's a bonus. Multi-band EQ can have some, multi-band compression can have some problems, but so can EQ. So wasn't really needed. I looked at setting up my main levels, and then I checked my mono. Yep, rockin'. Oh, with the compression, I did go for no RMS and quite a short attack. I wanted it to be really punchy. Personally, I will up the RMS myself, but this sounded much nicer with a tight kind of a feel on it. I swapped to my main limiter. Now, normally I have quite a slow close, but I was hearing it because I was using a lot more compression than I normally would, so a lot more limiting, so I've pulled it right back, so it's acting more and more like a clipper. Hear how that's clarified the mix. That's what mastering's about, bringing your levels to the right place. In this case they were too high. Levels to the right place, and to clarify that overall tone of the mix, and that's what we've got there. That is it. Again, of course, this has been a long one. This is me. If you have a mix that you would like to have done, especially professionally, it's not always 55 an hour. It's always based on what the budget is and what the work is. So talk to me. Don't come to me, what's your best price? Not interested. Talk to me. Show me what you've got. Very, very interested. If you do want a mix walkthrough, that's a good way of offsetting any budget constraints that you have. By default, a mix walkthrough, you do not get the mix. Slava's getting this mix, which says to you, if you talk to me, there's a solution. If you haven't already, subscribe, hit the like button, ask any questions down here. Politely, of course. I'm delighted to engage and answer any questions that have not already been in the material. You have a great day now.